Good evening and welcome to Across the Pitch. We're the soccer show for people who think LA Galaxy 2 is the latest invention by Elon Musk.
It's not?
Well,
He's doing everything.
It might be. I mean, of course, Elon Musk, he might invent a hairdryer that also cooks bacon tomorrow, for all I know.
Watch Elon Musk invest in the LA Galaxy here in the next couple of years.
Well, I mean, it would fit right in. Maybe SpaceX could be the shirt sponsor, and it would kind of fit right in with the whole Galaxy thing.
Right? Tesla's the official car manufacturer of the LA Galaxy. They're all driving around in Teslas.
You never know. I mean, I could see Zlatan in a Tesla for sure. That's his style, I think.
Oh, for sure, man, for sure.
But yeah, we're going to talk about actually both the USL and the MLS here in tonight's episode. And for the first time in Season 2, I have Matt Robards joining. Welcome back to the show, Matt, and looking forward to chatting with you here all Season 2. How have you been?
Yeah, man, I've been well. Family's been good, so I'm ready for soccer season to kick up again in England, and as we do this playoff push with the USL and the MLS, it's things are getting exciting here. So I'm excited for Season 2, and I can't wait for all three of us to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's going to be a lot of fun, especially over these next few months. As you said, the American season is going to be winding down. The English season is going to be kicking off. I mean, what we have here is we're only about 2.5 weeks from the first regular season games of that Premier League. We only have about 12 games left of the season for most of the teams at the USL and the MLS. Those seasons are ending in October, so we're hitting the last 2 months or so of the seasons here. And just so much that's happening. And of course, how could we not start out by talking about the Phoenix Rising, our hometown team here, who set a pretty impressive record last night. What do you think about that, Matt?
I mean, this is history, right? USL regular season win streak, 11 games winning in a row. It's not an easy feat in any professional sport, and the guys down here have been playing extremely well, clicking on all cylinders. Coach Rick Shantz has just had them just dominating games. And so it's been very exciting to be a Phoenix Rising fan right now. And you know what? Honestly, man, as I look through the schedule, I don't think this win streak is ending at 11 at all.
Yeah, I really don't see that either. And it really is especially impressive to have a winning streak that long in soccer, because you hear about 11-game unbeaten runs quite often, but you don't really hear about 11-game winning streaks, just because scoring goals is hard in soccer. And how many teams end up having a 0-0 draw. So I mean, an 11-game winning streak doesn't mean that you just have to win those games. That means that you actually have to be scoring every time that you step on the pitch, and scoring more goals than the opposition. So it really just has been an amazing run. And what can you say about Solomon Asante, Adam John, Junior Flemings, and then guys like Joey Calistri, Amadou Dia? Just players are stepping up left and right for this team. Last night against the Tulsa Roughnecks, it was a bit of a rougher one than we expected, but they came through once again. What did you think about that match last night?
Yeah, I think I wasn't surprised at all by the way Tulsa came out to play. And we're going to get into this a little bit as we talk about, our other team's going to mimic what Tulsa did. This is a team, Tulsa, that's sitting at the bottom of the Western Conference table. They're sitting on 18 points out of 21 matches, and that's just not good. So they're not a strong squad. And on top of that, if you look at the Western Conference standings, they're kind of out of it. I mean, we're this early in the season, and they're 11 points out of a playoff position. And the way they play, the way they concede goals, they're at a negative 16 goal difference. They've scored 27, conceded 43. I just don't see them making a run to the playoffs this year. And so I think they're just playing really to hamper damage. You know, it's just damage control. Because, like, let's look at, we're talking about this win streak. And so let's put in perspective. The last time Phoenix Rising lost was on May 4th. Since then, these are the score lines: 3-1, 4-0, 4-2, 5-0 to Tulsa Roughnecks, 4-0, 3-0, 4-1, 4-2, 1-0, 6-0, and then 1-0 last night to Tulsa. I think this Tulsa team was out just to try and get a point. And so they played a compact defense. They tried to shut down stuff in the midfield, and it took a lot of guts, man. And it's one of those scrappy wins you need to set that kind of record. And you're going to need that goal from a guy on the field who doesn't usually contribute in that manner. And Kevon Lambert stepped off in a corner and placed it home with his head. And so we walk out 1-0 winners and 11 match winning streak.
I couldn't have said it better because with Tulsa, I mean the 18 points and second to last and all the stats don't really even tell the story on how bad of form they've been in. As long as the Phoenix Rising have been on a winning streak for, Tulsa actually hasn't won a game in longer. Last night was their 13th match in a row since they've gotten a win. They have had some draws in there, but they've gone 13 matches without a win. They've now played 8 games, and Rodrigo de la Costa has scored 3 goals for them in those 8 games. Those are the only 3 goals they've scored in the past 8 games. So they've only had one player that has scored for them in their past 8 games. And like you said, Matt, I mean, they're a team. They're sitting back. They're playing 11 men behind the ball. They haven't cut their grass in 3 months. I mean, they're just a team. I made a comment on Twitter last night. It reminds me of when you see a team like Crystal Palace playing against Liverpool or Man City and just trying to get out of there with that 1 point, laying back, playing that park the bus defensive style of football.
Right. I mean, that's just what they were trying to do. I mean, last time we met them, 5-0 on a Friday night, dollar beer night, where we're undefeated. And I think they're just trying to limit the damage. And it was working out really well for them. And then, they get the red card late in the first half, and Kevon Lambert finds himself free on a corner after a little Adam John header back into the center of, the goal, and he flicks it home.
Yeah, now you mentioned this a bit earlier, but I guess the one question that it does raise from last night is Tulsa did have some success with this style that they were playing and maybe just didn't quite have the horses to get it done. Do you think that we're going to see other teams try this style? Like, for instance, LA Galaxy 2 is the next team that the Phoenix is going to be playing at LA coming up here on Saturday. I think that's going to be a tough game because I think maybe they would watch some of the things that Tulsa did, and then they have a little bit more talent on their club. Do you think this is going to be a tough game, and do you think that Tulsa has maybe given other teams a blueprint on the Phoenix Rising?
Yeah, I think anytime you go out on the road, it's a tough game, especially in the USL or the MLS when you're traveling, a lot of miles sometimes. And so while this is only a 6-hour bus ride to LA, I think anytime you're out on the road, it's just a tough game. LA is going to be playing at home where they're comfortable. They haven't traveled. And so that's where the team always has to step up. But we have a good road form, so I'm not too worried about it. As far as Tulsa kind of giving other teams a blueprint, I don't think so, man. I think Tulsa sat back and defended with their lives because they were just trying to get out of there with a point. And that's normally not what you go into a home match thinking. When you're at home, you're thinking, let's go get 3 points in front of our fans or in front of the supporters. Let's, get back in this playoff race or maybe this first place race or whatever it is. And I think Tulsa's so far out of it, sitting at 17th at 18 points, that they're just thinking, let's just stop the embarrassment. Let's try to get at least a draw. We'll get a point, maybe try to build some momentum. where you got a team like LA who's sitting on 27 points. They're only 2 points out of, the closest playoff spot, and they want to win every game. So I don't
Yeah,
think
they need the three
right. They
points.
need 3 points. They're at home, so I don't think they're just going to sit back and defend. I think they're going to be open, and that honestly suits the Phoenix Rising style. We look for those balls in behind, quick breaks, and so when you got teams that are pushing offensively, that's where you see guys like Junior Flemings and Solomon Asante and Baquero that really kind of just exploit that space and look for those runs. And you got Dumbuya and Dia kind of running up the flanks as well. So overall, I think it's going to be a great match, and I think we will come out with the 3 points just because I think we're just a lot better. We have a lot more talent, but I don't see other teams doing that. Now, as I look at the schedule, I would say probably until August 31st when we go to Colorado will be the next time that a team just sit back and defends. Colorado right now is sitting in 16th place on 20 points. And so just depending on how, their next couple matches go, they might be out of that playoff race. And so they'll be sitting back defending a little bit more too.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Colorado because that actually kind of transitions into the next thing that we're going to talk about here. Is I did just want to look at some of the other teams that are in this playoff race. The first team you have to look at is Reno. They absolutely battered Colorado last night. I
Right.
actually watched that game. It finished 4-0, and with that win, Reno actually pulled within 3 points of Phoenix Rising. They seem to be hanging right back there at 3 points. However, they have played two additional games. One of those two additional games, they actually lost to Orange County on Wednesday, which is a very weird 1 p.m. Wednesday start. So thank you, schedule makers, for giving that to Reno. But I guess that brings two questions. One, do you think that Reno has the horsepower to stay in this the whole time? And do you think they're a legitimate contender? And then the other team that I mentioned there, Orange County, they seem to maybe be rounding into form a little bit. Do you think that they could be a sleeper team down the stretch?
Yeah, man. Those are great questions. I think Reno has played extremely well. They look like a club that made some offseason moves. They've strengthened their roster. They're looking, just like they're clicking on all cylinders. And I think those two games are actually going to come back to haunt them. Where they've dropped points. Because as you said, right now they're sitting on 41 points. They have a relatively similar goals for. We've put 53 past our opponents. They put 48, but they've conceded a lot more. I think that's where their weakness is in their defense. So I definitely think that they're kind of the real deal. But if we just hold first, I think with our two games in hand, if we win both of those, that 3 points is now 9 points. And so if we're just able to keep that, Reno coming here to play, I think that's a game we win in the playoffs. And so they're I think they're a good contender, but I just don't think they have the firepower, the depth, or the talent that we have.
I agree. I mean, the first time we played them was at Reno, and it was at short rest, and we still handled them pretty
Right.
easily. The next match that they'll have against Phoenix will be on August 16th at Phoenix. The other games that I kind of marked on the calendar that I thought might be tough matches coming up for Reno, they have to play at Fresno, who's currently in third, on the 7th. And then I still think New Mexico United, they're a team that maybe is at least the fourth best team. And Reno has to travel to New Mexico on 9/20. That's New Mexico. They're getting in about 14,000 fans per game. And to me, that's going to be a tough place for anybody to go into, especially when you consider I spoke with Dave Saunders, who's a color commentator for the Tulsa Roughnecks this morning, and he mentioned that the Tulsa Roughnecks, if they get in 2,000, 2,500, that that's a good crowd. where New Mexico, they're getting in about 14,000 for some games. And to me, the difference between 14,000 and 2,500 is like the difference between taking a shower and walking through the car
Right,
wash.
right. Yeah, man. New Mexico's an interesting one. They have had an up and down form lately. But again, I'd agree with you. I think maybe right now they're probably the fourth best team if when it's all said and done. But if they drop any more points, they could be down there at sixth, seventh. Where they're sitting at now. So it'll be interesting for that team as well.
What games going down the stretch do you have an eye on that you think that you're going to keep an eye on and say, okay, that the winner of this game is maybe a team that I think has a chance to challenge for the Western Conference?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I think obviously you look at Phoenix and Fresno on the September 21st. Fresno keeps up their form because they have 2 games in hand as well on Reno, 1868, and they're not that far behind them, so they could potentially move up to that second place spot. The next week, Phoenix travels to New Mexico United, which will be an interesting matchup as well. And so I think those will be 2 games that matter a lot. And then, like you mentioned, you got Fresno at Reno is a huge game. I mean, it's all over, man. This isn't going to slow down at all. Reno playing Austin September 15th, then Austin going to New Mexico before the week before that. So there's just a lot of these games coming up where you have a lot of these playoff position teams playing each other. And so I don't think it's necessarily going to affect what teams make the playoffs as much as it's going to affect seeding. But again, for us Phoenix Rising supporters, if we win at home and at least draw away, that puts us in a great position to lock up that first spot. But if we go to Fresno and drop points, if we don't get any points in Fresno, if we don't get any points in New Mexico United, those might be those 2 games in hand that we've talked about. Now we've dropped those points and everything gets a lot tighter. And all of a sudden, those last 3 games against Portland and Real and OKC Energy, those become serious games to win to affect that. We want home field advantage, right, throughout the playoffs, and then potentially even looking at hosting USL Cup 2019. So all these games are important. I think we have to take them all seriously, and I honestly don't think there's a night coming where Rick can say, you know what, I'm going to rest players for this game or that game.
No, home field just is such a big deal. I mean, look at what happened last year. Phoenix Rising had to go on the road in the final, and they lost that one. Now, one thing I did want to kind of go back to is a team that you mentioned was Austin Bold. And there's actually really 2 Texas teams that have kind of caught my eye that maybe aren't really at the top of the table right now. One is Austin Bold. They just seem to be awfully, awfully tough at home. They got another home win last night. The other team is a team that got off to an extremely slow start, but I think could sneak their way into the playoffs, and that's San Antonio. San Antonio has 3 wins and is undefeated. San Antonio is unbeaten in their last 5, with 3 wins out of those 5. Do you think that San Antonio with Billy Forbes, actually, I saw him getting on the board last night. Do you think that San Antonio or Austin are teams that could contend down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to put my money on, like if I had to pick one, I would actually go San Antonio. I think they're starting to click.
Mhm.
Austin seems to be decent at home, and then doesn't play that well on the road. And they're kind of sitting in a precarious position right now. Austin is in fourth on 32 points, but really you look at the teams around them, and there's everyone below them has 29. And so a couple drop points, couple wins don't go their way, and all of a sudden those teams are jumping. Uh, like you said, San Antonio seems to be getting hot right now. Billy Forbes, they have Bradford Jameson on loan from LA Galaxy. They have Jack Barmby. They just kind of have some pedigree behind them, and I think they're just starting to click right now. And so I think I'm going to pick them to go with a playoff spot.
That loan from LA Galaxy, that really kind of seemed to be a turning point for them. The other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is we mentioned Orange County as a potential sleeper. They're a team that, of course, last year they were one of the best teams in the Western Conference. They got off to a really slow start and seemed to be having a hard time finding somebody to be that kind of go-to scorer. They've been starting Michael Seaton up front now. He's got 3 goals in the last 5 games. Do you think he's a guy that can be that go-to scorer that can lead them to the playoffs and put them back to where you expect them to be?
Man, it's tough. So he's been there since 2018. If he catches on, if he comes on real strong, he might help push them up. I just, Orange County this year just seems just out of it. It doesn't seem like things have been going well for them. They've been clicking at all, and so they're going to have to work really hard to make one of those playoff spots. And ultimately, I don't think it's going to happen for them. I think you have a bunch of other teams that are just performing better right now. I think the way San Antonio's coming on. You're talking about New Mexico United, El Paso's looking decent, OKC Energy, Portland Timbers too. Austin. That's a lot of ground to make up, and a lot of teams that you kind of have to rely on results to fall your way. And I think it's going to be tough for them. They're sitting in 12th right now, 27 points. And just with as tough as this Western Conference is, I don't see it happening for them.
Yeah, it is really a tough conference because if you look at it, I think that you can pretty much write off uh, Tulsa, and you could certainly write off Tacoma. Other than that, any of the other 16 teams could make the playoffs. You have 3 teams in Phoenix, Reno, and Fresno that, looking at where they're at points, they're probably in. So then what that leaves you at is 11 teams fighting for 5 positions. So it's a game of musical chairs, and there's only 5 chairs
Right.
for
Yeah. And
11.
I mean, so, you even look at Colorado as sitting at 20 points, man, they're kind of on the bubble right now here at the end of July. You talk about a couple more drop points and they're out too. So that 11 goes to 10. I mean, it's tough, man. This is a tough.
I don't think Colorado has it. I mean, they replaced their coach. They didn't get a new coach bounce out of that. They just looked awful against
Right.
Reno last night. I think we could probably mark off
Right. So I
Colorado
mean,
as well.
this is it, man. This is the tough conference, and these teams are going to be fighting right now for these playoff spots. But luckily, we're sitting at the top at 44 points, and kind of just saying, hey guys, if you don't watch out, we're going to leave you in the dust.
Let's just real quickly touch on the Eastern Conference. And the Eastern Conference is a little bit more separated, and it really comes down to there's 4 teams in the Tampa Bay Rowdy, Red Bulls to Indy 11, and then North Carolina FC. I feel like those 4 teams have kind of separated themselves as the best of the East. Yesterday, Tampa Bay lost to Red Bull 2. We have a big matchup coming up this week with Indy at North Carolina FC. I really think it's probably going to be one of those 4 teams that comes out of the East. What do you think
Yeah, I
on
mean,
terms of that?
unfortunately, I haven't watched a lot of the Eastern Conference in the USL this year, but what I do see, Indy 11 just seems to be having a great year, which is, if I remember correctly, last year was kind of rough for them. New York Red Bulls too have always kind of been a dominant team, and then Tampa Bay, man, you got to give it to them. They are figuring it out. They are going, and they look like they might be that team in the Eastern Conference. And so, as long as we stay above them in point totals and have the better record at the end of the year, they're going to have to take that long flight out to Arizona instead of us taking that long flight to Florida. And we saw last year how much that could matter.
Let's talk about what's happening in the MLS a little bit because there's some exciting stuff happening there, especially interesting what's going on in the Western Conference. One thing that I definitely wanted to make sure that we talked about is a game that I know that we were both intently watching on Friday. and that was Atlanta versus LAFC. And if you had a chance to watch that one, it certainly lived up to the billing. It was a weird game, to say the least. What were your takeaways from that? And do you think that you can take away anything from that, or was that just one of those weird Friday night games where, if you played them, 10 times over, there'd never be another one that went like that?
Yeah, man, that was a great game. I mean, you second minute goal, Mo Adams kind of just getting on this. It looked like if I remember correctly, it was like a set piece, like off the training pitch, and then, but then you had LAFC coming back and just doing what LAFC does, just looking absolutely dominant. I mean, after Atlanta got that goal, it almost seemed like Atlanta just stopped playing. I mean, LAFC was just passing it around and playing around them. And then they finally score in the 33rd minute, then the 38th minute, then the 42nd minute. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, oh man, this is getting out of hand quick. And then Atlanta pulls a couple goals back. Joseph Martinez finally gets on one. Then they had the own goal. I mean, it was just back and forth, man. And this game was fun to watch.
It was. And at the end of the game, Atlanta was really firing. It came close to tying it up a few times. And what my takeaway
yeah.
was one, Atlanta kind of proved the two things that are kind of their identity, being a bad road team and being a second half team. They showed both of those things.
hmm
I thought that LAFC, and not only in that game, but also with what Zlatan did to him the week before, has showed that their defense maybe isn't quite as good as the numbers show. And then the last thing that I would take away is I would say, in spite of the final score, there were more minutes out of the game that Atlanta was the better team.
Right, man. That second half turned around for Atlanta. They were possessing the ball. They were going at LAFC, and it was a couple times where, again, you're thinking, what happened in the first half? Like, where was that LAFC team? What did Bob Bradley say to them? What didn't he say to them? Did they all go back and take naps at halftime? I mean, it was wild, man. Hey, and that could be the MLS Cup final this year. Who knows? But it was a great game. LAFC played their game. They won at home, where they seem to be just unbeatable. And so we'll see what happens, man. You know how it gets. Once you get to the playoffs, all of this goes out the window. And a team like Portland, sitting in seventh, can go on a run and just get into that MLS Cup spot.
Well, let's talk about Portland actually, because like you mentioned, they are in seventh, which is the first time that they've been in playoff position all season. They just did that after beating the Galaxy 4-0 at home. Now, we actually kind of talked about this a few times on the show once they made that acquisition of Brian Fernandez, that we thought they were going to make a run. And boy, have they. Now, let me give you a little rundown of the numbers, because these are impressive. And this was something I was looking at before the show. Before Fernandez got to Portland, they were 3-1-5. So they had played 9 games before Fernandez arrived. They were 3-1-5. Since Fernandez has arrived, they've played 12 games. They're 6-3-3 in those 12 games. However, Fernandez has actually only played in 10 of the 12, and 2 out of the 3 losses were those games that he didn't play in. So they're actually 6-3-1 in games that he's played in. He's taken 42 shots in 10 games, so he's averaging 4.2 shots per game, which is right around the same number of shots per game that Carlos Vela is averaging for the Galaxy, just to kind of give you an idea of what he's been doing. He had 2 goals against Seattle back on the 21st. He's now scored 8 goals in 10 games since coming to Portland. Do you think that he's going to continue to be the difference maker that maybe gets them to a second consecutive cup final?
Yeah, I mean, this was huge. We talked about this. Gosh, I can't remember when, a couple months ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Just how he changes the game for them. He is that attacker that can hold up play, that lets other people into the game, and this is what they needed. Ever since really they lost Fernando Adi. They lost him, and just things weren't clicking up top for them at all. They couldn't really find anyone to come in and be that forward. You have Jeremy Abobasi, who's kind of a young talent, and he showed some signs, and then he dropped off. You have a guy like Darren Espria, who has been in and out of that team, and as well as playing for Portland Timbers too. You had all these other forwards, and finally, man, they found this guy Brian Fernandez, in Liga MX, and they bought him for a club record fee, DP signing, and he's come in and changed the game for him. And I think if him and Diego Valeri and Sebastian Blanco keep playing together and keep playing well, I mean, they're all Argentinian, and they probably hang out, on off days and after practice. And so if they keep clicking, man, I think this is the team that can look very dangerous, and they might be the team that has the best potential to knock LAFC out of a playoff. They're looking on fire right now, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if Portland does finish, say, fourth or higher, that you have to look at Brian Fernandez in the MVP discussion. Because I mean, like I said, this is a team that right now, without him, they are 3-1-7 without him, 6-3-1 in games that he has played in. If that's not an MVP, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's hard to overlook what Vela's doing in LA. But it makes you wonder if Carlos Vela wasn't up there, would someone else step up? Would Diego Rossi have most of those goals? Would
Diamande,
Diamande? Would
yeah.
Christian Ramirez? Would they have Atuesta? I mean, they have so many names that could step up and help Carlos Vela. But a guy like Brian Fernandez, man, I agree with you. At least if he's not MVP, he's got to be like a newcomer of the year. I think MLS has that award too. But he's just made a huge difference for them.
You hit the nail on the head is that Villa has so much more around him in terms of other guys that could score, where Fernandez clearly is the guy that's making the difference for Portland. And I don't know, is the postseason taken into account for the MLS MVP, or is that just a regular season award?
I believe they don't even announce the MLS MVP until before the MLS Cup. So I'm assuming they would, it's tough, man. They might tell you that, hey, you can only vote based on regular season performance, but people are
Yeah,
going to
so
vote with the
when
eye
does
test.
voting end? I guess that's the main question.
Yeah. And to be honest, I really, off the top of my head, I have no
We'll have to look
idea.
that one up. We'll look
So
that one up and post it on Facebook and Twitter
there
later.
you go. Yeah.
All right, well let's look at some of these other teams now. Now, a game that I watched yesterday that I kind of had half an eye on because it was on at the same time as Phoenix Rising was my favorite MLS team, Minnesota United, who are doing very well this season. And they came in second in the Western Conference in goals scored with 38. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to score any, and I ended up with a 0-0 draw at home. They didn't allow any, but not really the result they were looking for at home against Vancouver. But overall, what do you think about Minnesota? Do you think that they're a team that could maybe get to the second or third round of the playoffs in the West?
Yeah, man. Yeah, they've come on strong this year. Last season was not great for them, but they had made a couple off-season acquisitions, and now they're just rolling, man. You got to bring in a guy like Ike Opara to strengthen that back line. A couple offensive guys being brought in, and all of a sudden you go from finishing 10th in the MLS Western Conference last year to sitting at 5th. Here's where it gets crazy. Last year, Minnesota United had 36 points total the entire season. and they're sitting on 35 points right now. I mean, so there's 12 more games to play, and they're 1 point off of what they did the entirety of last year. So if that's not a turnaround, I just don't know what is. And so if they keep playing the way they're playing, especially at home, unfortunately they tripped up against Vancouver, but I don't see why they shouldn't be talked about as a team that could make MLS Cup final. I mean, probably a deep playoff run. I think the big thing with the MLS is really those bye games when you get into that first round. I think those can just completely throw you off. And so if it was me, I think I'd much rather play those first round games just to keep that momentum going. And so I think it'll depend on where they end up. But yeah, I could see them going at least second round.
At least want to finish fourth or higher so that you make sure that you get that bye game at home.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I don't know if I'd want a first round bye. Just the way, just the way it is.
Well, I guess I misspoke. I guess I was meaning that you would want to have the knockout round game at home for
Right.
sure.
Right.
You wouldn't want to go on the road for that. But the thing that's concerning to me a little bit is Minnesota actually has a huge game coming up at home on Sunday against Portland, who we were just talking about, which is a big game in terms of Western Conference playoff position. Unfortunately, Darwin Quintero got his fifth yellow card of the year and won't be playing Sunday. How big is that going to be for them?
I think it's a massive blow. Darwin Quintero is a great player. He's almost involved in most of their goals. He's a guy that can drive at the defense. He makes things happen, and so especially against a team like Portland, that's a huge miss for them. And so hopefully they have guys that can step up, and maybe Adrian Heath can adjust his game plan accordingly to deal with that. But that's going to be an interesting game, man, especially considering what happens just 3 days later on Wednesday for the U.S. Open Cup semifinal. Portland is going to probably just stay up there in Minnesota, and because those two teams face each other again. So this is going to be very interesting. We're going to look at a team. You have both teams fighting for these playoff spots, and then both teams in the semifinal of a cup competition. Are we going to see one team prioritize, the cup over the league game? Are we going to see one team, say, hey, no, the league game's more important. Let's throw all our eggs in that basket. Or are you going to have, the strongest lineups possible for both games? We do know Darwin Quintero is probably going to play on that Wednesday, though.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see that, and I don't really think that either one of these teams are in a position to prioritize either game because realistically they both need both
Right.
games because both of them are fighting for playoff position, and this isn't some third round game. Okay, maybe 2 months from now we get into the final or whatever. This is the semifinal game. If you win this game, then the next game is for the CONCACAF Champions League spot on the line, which is a huge amount of money for the club if they're able to get that. And then the thing that you have to look at is in the other side of the US Open Cup, you have Atlanta playing Orlando City. That game is going to be at Orlando City. We know how Atlanta struggles on the road. So then you could realistically have either the winner of Minnesota or Portland playing at Orlando City. I think either one of those teams would be favored over Orlando City regardless of venue. Or if they happen to get Atlanta, then they might have the chance of playing Atlanta at home. So I really think that the winner of that Minnesota Portland game is probably going to win the US Open Cup unless Atlanta beats Orlando City on the road and then gets the final at Mercedes Benz. Then I think Atlanta would win. That's kind of how I see that going, if that makes
Right. No,
sense.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting. And so here's the thing about that too is the Atlanta Orlando City game's on that Tuesday. So this is where kind of that strategic thought process all goes into this. You know, what's more important? The winner of the US Open Cup gets that Champions League spot. The winner of MLS Cup gets that spot. So, either of these teams might be saying, hey, right now it might be better for us to win the Open Cup Minnesota's sitting in a playoff spot already. They could probably easily get one. They're looking good. Portland's on the bubble, but they're coming up. So, I mean, this is kind of a huge week for both of these teams. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens.
The suspension might kind of force Minnesota's hand to put their eggs in the Open Cup basket because realistically, like you said, Quintero's goal involvement, especially if you look about a month and a half ago, when actually, I guess 2 months ago now, at the beginning of June, Minnesota was in a slump. What corresponded with that slump, Darwin Quintero was in a slump. All of a sudden, there was an Open Cup game against Sporting KC. Quintero hit a couple goals. Minnesota turned their form around as soon as their star striker turned his form around.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be without that guy against Portland, who's playing well. Now, they do have that at the Allianz Stadium, so certainly that works in their favor. On the other hand, Wednesday, it's a chance for, as Callum has told us, Minnesota United is a team that's kind of one of those teams that doesn't get talked about. Portland certainly doesn't have that problem. I think that Minnesota United is probably going to look at this. If we can get to the US Open Cup final, that's something that can put our team kind of on the map getting talked about.
Right.
There is also, let me ask you this, and I think the answer is no, but let me ask you. The winner of the US Open Cup gets $300,000. Does $300,000 even matter to an MLS team?
I think it just depends on which MLS team. But ultimately, I would probably say no. I mean, you look at teams like LAFC, LA Galaxy, New York Red Bulls. These guys got ownership groups that are going to go out and spend money anyways. Portland just
Well,
spent
right, right. I
10
mean,
to 12 million.
LAFC does.
I think a team like Minnesota that could help a lot, man. I think that covers some of your lower end, salaries. And I think we just got to remember, dude, for me, it's winning a trophy, right? So US Open Cup semifinal, you're 2 games away from lifting a trophy, lifting a hardware. In the MLS total every year, only 3 teams can claim that. And that's if a team doesn't win, the Supporter Shield and MLS Cup or the Open Cup and the MLS
Right.
Cup, right? So you're talking 3 teams in the MLS get to lift a trophy. I think you just go for it, man. I think as a supporter, I'd rather win a trophy than finish first in the league or finish in a playoff spot and not go to MLS Cup.
Yeah, I mean, as a Minnesota United fan myself, I personally am more interested in seeing them win on Wednesday.
Right. Yeah. Especially.
I mean, this is one of those things where it's like if you had asked me if it was a third or a fourth round game, I'd say no, the MLS game. But now that you've gotten this far, it's the Open Cup
Right.
game.
And I think on the fourth, on that Sunday game, the league game, Portland needs those points more than Minnesota United does. And so Adrian Heath going, hey, we don't have Darwin Quintero. Let's play more defensively. Let's maybe play for that draw. We'll still get a point out of the match. That might be the way to go right there. Is just saying, hey, let's play for that draw. Then on Wednesday, let's go out there and hand it to them, especially because guys like Brian Fernandez and Diego Valeri and Sebastian Blanco and Diego Chara have just played 3 days before 90 minutes. And so that's probably the route I would go is kind of walk into Sunday saying, let's minimize damage. Let's try to walk out of this game with a point. We're at better standing in the league. And then let's really go out. Let's beat them thoroughly on Wednesday. Let's book our place in the final and let's host the match.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy because not only if you do get a draw, not only are you getting a point out of it, but you're taking 2 points away from Portland, who's one of those teams competing for a playoff spot.
Right.
And now we talked about, or you mentioned earlier how Minnesota has been a bit of a surprising team, although we kind of saw that coming a little bit with the off-season signings, as you mentioned. But before we wrap up our MLS talk for today, there's a team that we have to talk about, and this is a team that we were pretty hard on at the beginning of the season. I think we might have even picked them to finish last. But right now, the team that actually now has the second most goals in the Western Conference after a 3-1 win over Colorado is now the San Jose Earthquake, who are in fourth place, 37 points, just 1 point back of Seattle in second, plus 6 goal difference. What do you make of the San Jose Earthquake? Are they for real?
Yeah, man, this has been shocking. When the season kicked off, Matias Almeida kind of bringing in, this new style, new coach. And so I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, it's going to take a while for this to catch on. And they struggled. They struggled at the beginning of the year. And now things have been, catching on. I mean, if we go back to the beginning of the year, you're talking loss, loss, loss. Their first win comes in April, then another loss, and then they pick up another win, and then you get draws, but now they're catching on, man. I mean, you're talking 4 wins out of their last 5 matches, and they're looking good. And so I think this is a team in the Western Conference that is not to be slept on anymore. They're sitting at fourth right now, 37 points, right there with LA Galaxy, who they just handed a loss to, here a couple weeks ago, and 1 point behind Seattle, and unfortunately, no one in the West I think is going to catch LAFC. They're sitting at 49 points right now.
Yeah,
But if they can shoot up to that second spot, you're talking hosting some playoff games that gets you a little bit further, and we could see a California derby, in the Western Conference Finals between LAFC and San Jose if they keep going.
Yeah, I mean the Eastern Conference is closer at the very top because you have LAFC running away with things. But in the Eastern Conference, you kind of have the teams that have been there all season, and
Mm-hmm.
teams like Atlanta and the Red Bulls, and even Philadelphia was a playoff team last year that you kind of expect to be there. In the Western Conference, you have these new clubs in San Jose and Minnesota United that you did not necessarily expect to be where they're at. And that's what's really exciting to me. Also, to have Portland making their run. I think that the Western Conference is really going to be. It's just going to be a horse race behind LAFC to see who can get those last 6 playoff
Right.
positions. And it's going to be a lot of fun down the stretch. What do you think it is that has keyed San Jose to turn around like that? Has there been a specific acquisition, or what has keyed that turnaround, do you
I think really what it is just buying into Matias Almeida's system. I think it took a while for them to learn it. They struggled at the beginning of the year, but he stuck with it. And you got to give the front office credit for sticking with Matias Almeida for, a really just bad run of form at the beginning of the season. A lot of teams would have just said, hey, we tried it. We're sitting at 5 losses and 1 win and 0 draws, and so we just need to get him out of here, and we'll bring someone else in and we'll figure it out. But they stuck with him. He's implemented his system well. He has that team firing all cylinders. Chris Wondolowski's again just scoring goals, and so I think that's really what it comes down to. Is just they bought into the system. They were bad at it. They didn't give up. They kept working. Matias Almeida stuck to his guns. The front office said to him, we're behind you. And now they're reaping the rewards of that. They're sitting at fourth. I mean, had they dropped Matias Almeida after after a couple months, they could still be sitting down at 10th, 11th, 12th. And so definitely just by sticking with him and putting the support behind their manager, I think they're seeing a lot of the benefits now.
Fantastic stuff, Matt. I think that we've really we've covered a lot of ground here tonight in terms of especially both the Western Conference for the USL and the MLS. Before we wrap up, did you have anything that you wanted to say about the Eastern Conference, or were there any teams or games that you wanted to go over that we hadn't mentioned yet?
No, I think for me, just want to say the biggest surprise is by far Philadelphia Union. It's cool to see a club like that come along and sitting where they're sitting right now after really just kind of the bleak beginnings they had. If you haven't done so yet, I believe the documentary Sons of Ben is still on Netflix or Amazon Prime, one of those. And it really follows along with the fact that this MLS franchise was started by supporters, maybe not monetarily, but they formed the Sons of Ben before there was ever even hints of a Philadelphia franchise. And it was because of them that the ownership group came along and bought into their vision. And so it's cool to see them now, coming, to fruition, and this whole idea of them playing the soccer and seeing it first in the East. So it's just a great story overall.
Really is, and it's fun to see them. Now, one thing I did want to mention real quick in the Eastern Conference, and I hate to say it because I just don't like anything about this team. I know that you personally have a specific hatred for the field that they
Oh
play
man.
on. I have a specific distaste for the English team that they're affiliated with. I have a specific distaste for the park the bus style of football that they play. But if you look at the numbers, NYCFC is looking like a secret strongman in the East. Do you think that we have to worry about them making a challenge?
Honestly, man, it pains me to even talk about them. I don't think they deserve it just because of that horrendous stadium that they play in, that embarrassment that they call a pitch. I would much rather watch, where the Tulsa Roughnecks played, even though they had the baseball diamond taking up a fourth of the field. That looks so much better than what NYCFC plays on. That looks like you're watching a bunch of professionals play on a kid's soccer field. Um, but they are the only team. I mean, they have the best goal difference in the East right now. Um, they've they've scored 36. I don't know, man. It's tough. They have 4 games in hand on Philly, and that's pretty big. If they win those, so let's just say they've won all 4 of those right now. They're above Philly, for on 39 points, and they're actually above or even with LAFC. So I think they could come on. I think they're kind of a sleeper team, but again, it just pains me to even talk about them.
It really does. I was kind of having the same feeling you did when I started looking at those numbers in terms of goal difference and games in hand, and it's just like I've watched these guys play. They're not that good. How?
Well, you watch them play and you think anyone can score that many goals when they're playing on a pitch for 12-year-olds. I mean, it's just
It's like watching the Italian national team play.
the MLS needs to get their crap together and tell them it's time. You guys need to get a stadium
Yeah,
now. I mean, it's an embarrassment to the league.
yeah. Maybe they could just play their games in the middle of Central Park or something.
It's by far worse than any USL team using a baseball field, hands down.
What is the first tier and what is trying to promote itself as an elite league in the world and draw players that are elite players in the world? It's just not a good look for what is a marquee team that's playing in a place like New York City on top of everything.
Right. And look at your ownership group. I'm sorry, man. That ownership group shouldn't be content with watching that.
Yeah,
They have
they
money.
have the money. Exactly.
You're talking the Man City football group, ownership group, and I think the Yankees ownership group are minority owners. Dude's got money. Just go build something in Jersey. I don't care where you build it. Just build something. It's horrendous to watch. It is horrible. It's an eyesore, and I can't watch them because it just looks that bad.
Well, hopefully, we won't have to watch a MLS Cup final at Yankee Stadium.
Oh my gosh, man. Let's not even talk about that. That would probably be the biggest embarrassment for the MLS if that happened.
Maybe they would move it to where the Giants and the Jets play or something like that if it was a cup final.
Yep, for sure. They would have to.
Let's start a petition to make that happen just in case.
Oh, I'm down with that for sure.
All right, buddy. Well, this has been a really good time, and really excited for season 2 to get rolling here, and all of these games going forward. So I think that we'll let people go here for tonight. But did you have anything else to wrap up with?
Nah, man, that's all I got.
All right. Have a good night, Matt, and have a good night, everybody.